John Summers is the motoring historian. He was a company car thrashing technology sales rep that turned into a fairly inept sports bike rider. Hailing from California, he collects cars and bikes built with plenty of cheap and fast, and not much reliable. On his show, he gets together with various co hosts to talk about new and old cars, driving, motorbikes, motor racing, and motoring travel.
Good day, good morning, good afternoon. It is John Summers, the motoring historian. A bit of a special episode, this one. Got producer Eric and William Ferrari guy Ross with us. Mecum are auctioning the only white Ferrari GTO. William's been doing some work around it, and we got talking about it. We realised that really there's some interesting material about the car's past and history, especially its early racing history, which maybe the Mecum guys aren't leading with because nobody sells more muscle than Mecum. Nobody, but maybe other people do sell more prancing horses or bulls or Stuttgart product.
Well, John, always good to be back with you in studio. And to your point, I think there's three major topics that we want to cover about this 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. William, what's the serial number on that one?
3729 GT.
Yes, the Bianco Speciale, as they like to call it these days. You being the motoring historian, you've got a lot of facts rolling around in your head. And one of the names that keeps popping up in this conversation about the Bianco Speciale is John Coombs. And being a fellow Brit, I figured you'd just be able to whip this out off the top of your head. So let's dive into the legacy of John Coombs a little bit as it leads into the Ferrari.
The way to think about John Coombs is you hesitate to say Carroll Shelby because a sort of Texan cowboy, he certainly wasn't. The Coombs firm were a firm of car traders and coach builders. And Coombs himself, he was a Jaguar dealer in the post-war period and very involved with racing Jaguars and tuning Jaguars. If you visit the Goodwood Revival, they always have British saloon car races as if they were from the 1960s. That's really what Goodwood does well. You know, the little minis battling the Jaguar Mark IIs. And one of the most recognizable Jaguar Mark IIs is a grey one with the plate BUY, the number 1, by 1. That was a John Coombs built and prepared Jaguar. It's most regularly associated with Roy Salvadori, but Coombs built and prepared the car. I guess I first encountered the name of Coombs when I was looking really closely at Mike Hawthorn. And I wrote a piece. It's the only academic piece that I've ever had included in an actual academic history book. The book is the Routledge Companion to Automotive History. And I wrote a piece about Mike Hawthorn and specifically about Mike Hawthorn's death. This is a whole separate can of worms and it's not a conversation for today. But the point is that Mike Hawthorn wrapped his Jaguar around a tree just down the hill, about 200 yards from Coombs' workshop just outside Guildford, his Jaguar dealership. So after the wreck, Hawthorn's Jaguar was taken to Coombs, and there's photographs of it being at Coombs, and Coombs were involved with getting it transported back up to Browns Lane and Coventry. So because of that, I looked into who John Coombs was a little bit more than he was this bloke that did hot rod Jaguars.
When Hawthorne crashed, wasn't he, and I would say racing against somebody, but wasn't there another individual in another car?
Yes.
Horse playing around?
Yes, horse playing around is a good way to describe it. The language that the other individual used in court was that they were dicing. So this is not quite motor racing. We're not racing on the road. And the other individual was Rob Walker.
There we go.
Who was a Formula One team owner and was the heir to the Johnny Walker whiskey fortune. And something that has only come out in fairly recent years is that it is thought that Rob Walker pulled up outside Mike Hawthorn's house in the Mercedes and revved the crap out of his Mercedes 300 SL in order to get Mike Hawthorn out of bed. So he gave Hawthorn enough time to get dressed and out the front door, and then he ripped up the gravel and got out on the hog's back. And Hawthorn was killed on a bit of the A3, just close to the junction with the A30. And the A30 at that point runs along the top of a ridge of hills. Based upon personal experience. Nowadays, it's tragic, absolutely tragic. There's a very low speed limit along there. But as recently as when I was a sales rep and worked in Godalming, you could do the vehicle's maximum speed along the hog's back, but you really needed to worry about the wind. Hawthorn, in his Jaguar, had managed to catch Rob Walker in the Mercedes 300 SL by the time they merged off the hog's back A30 onto the A3. Hawthorn passes Walker and then spins right in front of him off into a tree, and it's like a driver door hit. So that was why Hawthorn did not stand any chance at all. Jaguar destroyed the car. And there's a whole lot of stuff about, was it the tire? Was it the fact that Hawthorn was an absolute bloody hooligan? There's really a lot of interesting mythology around it. And look, we have Rob Walker's account of what happened from court. So you have to say, when he was speaking to the judge, the judge pressed him on the speed, and, he's very vague about the kind of speed that they were doing. And that was what prompted me to really go and look at what happened and try and stand there. And, the roads changed a lot. And, for me, the reason it stuck in my mind was I was a sales rep at the time doing about 60,000 miles a year in somebody else's car. In my early 20s, it's somebody else's car, somebody else's gas card, somebody else's tires. So company cars got used up, and I used to be up and down that bit of the A30 all the time in the A. Well, after a bit, you begin to think, well, which corner was it that Hawthorn lost it on? Which was the one that caught him out, right? So I don't want to be caught out on that. It had a little bit of that kind of feel to it.
Let's pull on that Mike Hawthorn thread just a little bit longer. So that Jag that he was killed in was a Coombs prepared Jag, or was that just an off-the-shelf one?
Oh, it was not a Coombs prepared Jag. I just described how close Hawthorn lived to Coombs, the length of the hog's back, maybe 5 miles, something like that away. Hawthorn had his own Jaguar dealership, the TT Garage. His father did Rileys, then did Lanciers. He himself did Jaguars and Ferraris. Was Coombs in competition with Hawthorn? I think so. I think they were competitors on the track in terms of Roy Salvadori and in Buy One and Mike Hawthorn in VDU 881. But I also think what they were competing for was whether or not you, as a Jaguar buyer or somebody who wanted your Jaguar hot rodded, either for racing or just because you wanted a faster car, they were competing against each other as to whether you took the car to the TT garage to have Hawthorn's guys do the work, or whether you took it to the main Jaguar dealer, John Coombs.
What makes a diehard Jaguar tuner and dealer turn and buy a Ferrari?
This is an awesome story, Eric. Why Coombs bought a Ferrari? Because as a Jaguar dealer, he was keen that he could win with Jaguar products. And he'd been racing E-types, but they really weren't a match. They were too heavy. And I was lucky when I was 12 or 13, my dad bought me a subscription to Motorsport magazine. And on the cover at the time, it described it as the authoritative voice of the sport. I think for this particular period and for this particular niche, I love Motorsport as a source. In 2009, Simon Taylor went and had lunch with John Coombs, where he lived in Monaco. And over that meal, Coombs told him that he'd had a meal with Bill Haynes, Jaguar's chief engineer, where he described the engine of the Jaguar as a bloody pendulum, and how he was forced to go buy a Ferrari so that he could win some racing.
Yeah, boiled down to obviously being competitive, he wants to win. And that's where the story comes in. Him loaning 3729 GTO to Jaguar to reverse engineer it or just go over it and scrutinize it a bit to see what they can do. That created the Jag E-Type lightweight.
The thing that struck me as well is if you go to Goodwood and you see the E-Type lightweights that are active, the car that you see often is the car with the number plate 4WPD. Well, 4WPD was the Coombs E-Type, which after the Jaguar guys had looked at the GTO, that was the E-Type that had been originally raced and prepared by Coombs that went back to Browns Lane, the Jaguar factory, to be turned into the first lightweight E.
Do you know how much they really scrutinize or reverse engineer? I mean, did they like rip it apart? Do we know? I mean, they just kind of look it over and take some measurements. How in depth do they get into that GTO in regards to really scrutinizing it?
I mean, that meeting, the impression is that Bill Haynes wanted the car to come to Coventry. And I think if the car came to Coventry, there is one article knocking around written by a guy called Nathan Chadwick. And his article had even pulled out the performance figures that Jaguar's test driver Norman Dewis extracted from the car in comparing it with the Jaguar E-Type. It did 137 miles an hour, I remember, from the article.
Yeah, Norman himself was quite the character, and I'm sure he had some fun in that GTO testing it for Jaguar to find out what it could do. But, memory serves me, they made that E-Type lighter by a decent amount than the GTO to get that thing competitive. But in reality, I mean, it didn't blow its doors off. It made it more competitive.
It's called balance of performance these days.
There you go.
Yeah, but it did shift the bouncer, because the other interesting thing I read about was the Ferrari 330 LMB at another point in its life. I read one account where it compared the performance of the 330 LMB with the 250 GTO, and the top speeds were similar, but the way they got there were different. The axle ratios were different. I think one's a 4-speed, one's a 5-speed.
Yeah.
Going back to Norman Dewis, I remember the quarter mile times. I think the Ferrari did a 13.5 and the E-Type did a 13.7.
I mean, that's respectable. That's nothing to sneeze at.
I want to dive into, before we get into the color, which is one of the most important parts of the car, is its racing history. What did he buy it for? What kind of racing was on his mind? Because he basically bought a Le Mans prepared car to race in England? Or am I wrong about that, John?
The biggest race for cars of that type at that time was Le Mans in terms of, prestige. But he bought it to sell cars domestically. So that meant that it was going to do races like Silverstone International Trophy, for example. So this is an international race, but the vast majority of the entry is going to be British people. If you think of it, even Jaguar went to Le Mans, made an effort to go there, but they didn't really make an effort to go to the Nürburgring and do the 1,000 kilometers there. They certainly didn't make an effort with the Targa Florio. The effort with the Mille Miglia was not really very serious if you look back. Mercedes made a point of traveling a long way. The Italians made a point of going to Argentina. But I really get the feeling that the racing scene at that time was quite parochial in comparison to the way that it is now. And for John Coombs, the important thing was winning some races in and around the south of England and maybe a few in northern France and Belgium and something like that. You wouldn't go too far away because nobody's going to travel that far to come and buy a Jaguar off you.
So would you then classify that more as what we would say, here stateside, it's more club racing for John Coombs than being on the international scene with that car?
Yes.
But then he would bring in Graham Hill and Salvadori and all these other drivers to drive that car for him?
Because at that time, although Graham Hill was a Formula One world champion, he was still very much involved in club racing at that time. One of the features of club meetings in Britain in that era was there would be 500cc cars, small engine saloon cars, minis or Anglias. There would be Jaguars, bigger cars. There would be a race for cars that were similar to contemporary Formula One cars. You wouldn't get a full turnout of a full Formula One field, but there would be a mixed field. And a feature of a lot of those meetings, it's quite astonishing to look back, was if Sterling Moss was there, he would enter every event and typically win every event. I mentioned that partly to illustrate Moss's dominance, but also to show that even the very best Max Verstappen, all this business of him racing GT3 cars now,
as Franz Hermann.
that was the norm back then. And if you think of Graham Hill, he famously did the Triple Crown, didn't he? And he's won like the Monaco Grand Prix, Le Mans, and Indianapolis.
Buying that car, obviously his competitors wanted to win, but to get Graham Hill and Roy Salvadori to drive, they were like, well, until you have a faster car. Was that something he got to entice them to come drive for him?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think that if you were going to race, I think he would want to win. So, yeah. But we talked about how Salvadori, he was the guy that Shelby won Le Mans with.
Yeah.
He was handy in sports cars, spent some time in Formula One, not a compelling success in Formula One. And I suppose what's interesting to me about it is that I believe you can see a clear stack ranking between Moss and Hawthorn and then Salvadori and Coombs in terms of skill sitting behind the wheel.
So the reason I want to go a little bit deeper down this path is one of the other big bullet points for this car that makes it interesting or special to a buyer is that it's a 250 GTO. There's only so many of those. It's white. We're still going to get to that. And then thirdly, right-hand drive. If we add that to its pedigree amongst everything else, and there was a little bit of debate. Why did Coombs order it right-hand drive? Is it just because he's a Brit and he wanted a right-hand drive? Because right-hand drives are more rare in the Ferrari build sheets than the left-hand drive cars. And then we started to kind of kick around the idea that because racing at the time in the early 60s, you wanted the driver on that side of the car, especially if you were going to run the car in a longer race where you had driver changes. You want them to be on the side of the pit box where it's safer. And you'll also note that the fuel filler is on that side of the car. But you had an interesting take on that perspective as well, John.
Oh, I'm pretty certain that those things might be valid, Eric, but I'm certain that the reason he had it as a right-hand drive car was because most circuits in Europe, and certainly most circuits in Britain, are clockwise circuits. So that means that there are more right-hand turns than left-hand turns. So what that means is it is better for you to be sitting on the right-hand side of the car instead of the left-hand side of the car, because it's easier for you to place the car, because that's the wheel that you're right in front of. You can see the apex.
And there's also an argument to be made about weight distribution. If all your weight is in the inside of the apex and not on the outside of it, it's going to corner better as well. If you shifted the driver the other way on a clockwise track, now the centrifugal force is stronger because there's more weight on the outside of the car. So moving him inboard, right-hand drive, makes a lot more sense too. I mean, this is very crude tuning and car setup and aerodynamics and everything else.
There's part of me that thinks that the reason you had it as right-hand drive was because it had to be driven on the road. I mean, these cars had registration plates. I mean, the thing that struck me about Hawthorn's Jaguar, that Jaguar VDU 881, he proposed in the car, he raced the car, it was his daily driver, and he died in it. It's like, did he have sex in it? I'm sure he did. The whole of life took place in that Jaguar. Yeah, so the other thing is I don't know, in the reading that I've done, I've not encountered where Coombs sourced the car, if the car came directly from Ferrari or if it came from an importer, because the name that you're probably familiar with, William, is Colonel Ronnie Hoare, who was the British importer of Ferraris. I don't know whether this was a car that Ronnie Hoare had imported and sold to Coombs. I don't know if Coombs went direct to Maranello. In that Nathan Chadwick article that I was referring to earlier, he refers to there having to be some special jiggery pokery with the UK agent to be able to order the car in the aforementioned.
Is that an official term, John? Jiggery pokery?
I like that.
William, you mentioned when we were talking to Sam and to Chris about the very limited number of 250 GTOs there are. And then inside of that, the even smaller number of right-hand drive 250 GTOs. And I'm harping on this only because John Coombs couldn't have been the only British person to buy a 250 GTO back then, when the majority of them were left-hand drive. So what is that real number of right-hand drive 250 GTOs?
Out of the 36 GTOs, there's only 8 right-hand drive. This one is number 12 of the 36 built. But if you look at the production on these, the majority of the right-hand drive cars were all built within the first build series of the cars, first year and a half, whatever it was. So my thought is, one, hey, it's a road registered car. So yeah, and a good portion of the people that bought them were in countries, i.e. the UK or what have you, where it was going to be right-hand drive and race-wise. But then as popular in regards to other series and around the globe and that, you had more people. I drive on the left side. The back end, majority, almost all the cars are all left-hand drive. My mind, it has a lot to do with location where it's at. And from my understanding, Coombs went direct to Ferrari, but then to make the transaction happen, he had to go through the importer because he had that kind of pull. But from my understanding, from what I can tell, it's just they bought it because he's in England. So I want right-hand drive. I want to say there was one more after that or two more after that are right-hand drive, but that was like within the next couple cars that were built. So like within the first 15 cars, all the right-hand drives were done. So then the balance were all left-hand drive.
And then according to the information we got, that was the third car destined for the UK. So it's like one of very few.
Yeah. So, I mean, but you look back then, there was still a large portion, especially in Europe, where, they were driving the wrong way on the right-hand side. Obviously, I like Australia stuff because there's a lot of European countries that actually started out driving right-hand drive, but then they switched like in the 50s and 60s just because of production stuff.
The Italians had a weird system where in towns and cities, particularly Milan, you drove on the left, but out on the main road, you would drive as the Italians do now. So there was a transition point in some towns and cities where as you came into the town city, you would stop being on the left and move to being on the right. And the logic around that was that you didn't want to be walking in the road when you got out of the car. Obviously, you wanted to be on the curbside because it was easier for you to spot parking. And when you pulled up, it was easier. There was a Lancia that won Pebble some years ago. And I think that was right-hand drive car. I remember learning it. It was a sort of luxury feature almost for Italians to have like the right-hand drive. So that meant that there's more right-hand drive Maseratis than actual cars that came to Britain because quite a lot of Italians bought them in that configuration. On the right-hand drive GTOs, William, what does it do for values? Is a right-hand drive car worth more than a left-hand drive?
I mean, in my opinion, I would say yeah, because I mean, look at it. You only have 8 out of 36 out of already extremely rare car. So then now you're just even making it more rare because you have only one of the 8 that were built. That's how I view it. But as with any car, though, you're going to have both sides of the coin in regards to how someone's going to view that. They're not going to drive this thing hardly on the street ever. I mean, it's going to be on track, historic racing, stuff like so. It's going to be raced. So it's not like you got to really worry about it all that much. But my opinion, it adds value. How much? I don't know. But I mean, just look at the numbers. You got one of the 36, well, these cars average 40 to 80 million dollars. Then you got one of the 8 out of those things. So it's got to add some intrinsic value to it to make it a little bit more special. And then obviously we get into the color here shortly. That just kind of icing on the cake, so to speak.
The motor. I was bimbling around on Ferrari chat just before we came online. The quote that stuck in my mind, the only GTO that doesn't have its original engine.
No, not the only one. No.
And my understanding is what happened to the engine, and that's from that awesome Lunch with John Coombs article. He reckons that after he had the car, Jack Sears had it, and then it ended up with a sort of, not quite a scrap metal dealer, but a sort of secondhand racing car dealer called J.A. Pierce in Slough.
Yeah.
It ended up there, but the engine was somehow separated from it and was put into a Cooper racing car or something like that. And so the engine has become separated from the car. So when the car's been put back together, they used to use Boanos, didn't they? The 250 Boanos.
Yeah.
Cheapest sacrificial V12 you could buy.
They dropped that in just to put a motor in the car, obviously for a motor, but then they actually got one out of a 275 comp. So they actually got the hot rod motor. It's got some oomph to it. Very rare engine. So right there, value that. But when John Shirley bought the car and had it for a while, when he sent it back to Ferrari to get Class C certification and get painted back to white, Ferrari cast a new block for it. So it's got the proper correct stampings on it, everything like that. I mean, you can't get much more authentic than that. That motor is the one that's in it now. And then the comp motor that they were using for the longest time, like Jack Sears had and everything of that, is now sitting on a stand because that's got a lot of value to itself there. So these were racing cars. Motors blew up. They replaced motors all the time. For them to say, oh, it's the only one not having its original motor, you're going to have some that don't. They're racing cars. That's what they did. They beat the hell out of them, blew things up, and crashed.
And this goes back to that conversation we had, the three of us, about the Mille Miglia, which then leads into that presentation by Trevor Lister and Don Capps about the family lineage of all these Maserati and Ferrari engines that, into your point, William, when something would blow up, they'd scrap it and get another one. They weren't really about numbers matching back then as much as we're obsessed with that today. And even then, there's numbers matching didn't really match because they would change the serial number of the car to match the motor.
Yeah.
And it's all sorts of craziness that makes absolutely no sense to anybody except the Italians.
Yeah, exactly. Then they changed the block and engine number, didn't match the car number. But then the car would go back to get repaired or some shit. Then they changed the VIN again. It was insane how they did it. Afterthought.
So you don't feel like this non-original engine hurts this car's value?
I don't. You have Ferrari, the manufacturer, build that car. They had all the original castings. They had everything from that when it was originally built and done and cast back in the 60s. They just pulled that out and redid it. I mean, I don't know how much more authentic you can get. It'd be one thing if you send it down to, what's his name? He's got a casting factory down the street and, hey, just kind of eyeball it. We'll make something close, do some dimensional checks. You can't get more authentic than that. Like I said, they stand to it with the correct numbers. You can't go wrong with that, in my opinion. Basically, get a brand new motor, in essence.
All right. So now the so what moment.
Getting to what, one of our big topics of discussion we were having with the guys at Mecum and also Chris Mealy from Prancing Horse of Nashville, because it was never really stated why that is the only white Bianco Speciale that Ferrari painted from the factory.
That's why I've been saving this color conversation. This is the so what moment of this car, because a lot of our listeners are probably, it's white. Who cares? It's black. So what? Most Ferraris are red. Yeah, we know that. Why is white so important? And so I think there's a huge debate around the why here, and the why becomes a what very quickly in this conversation.
You hear kind of stories like, hey, it could be about nationality because being British, but Coombs had an affinity for having light white, or it wasn't like white, but it was like a off white or something like that, but then also a gray. Did he have all his that way? I mean, you think that's probably the case for why he had enough pull that he could go to Ferrari, order this car and get it without much hassle.
And this is where I'm confused, and I want to lean on your expertise, John, because I hearken back to conversations I hear at the Argon Singer Symposium from people like Paul Baxa talking about nationalism and patriotism, and the colors are political. Like, all the Italian cars are always red. Look at the old Alfas and the Ferraris, they're always red. And the French cars are always blue. It didn't matter if it was Peugeot or Delahaye or whoever it was. The Brits were green and the Germans were silver. White is such in my mind, an odd choice for a British racer. I'm going to say it that way. So why white? Do we have any idea as to why John Coombs' cars were white and black?
I think they were his racing colours. They were the colours that he'd used on the Jaguar. So it was natural that he put those colours onto the Ferrari when he bought it. Those colours said Coombs. That's the important thing. And if you look at all those pictures of saloon car racing, as the Jaguars are against each other, the grey car with the buy one plate, if that one's winning, you're going to go to Coombs to buy a Jaguar, not to Mike Hawthorn.
And I'm glad you said that, because if we go back to that ideology of the color signifies the country, at that time, even though we're 30 years past the 1920s and the Mille Miglia and all that kind of stuff in its heyday of nationalism, American cars were generally white. And famously, the Cunningham cars and the Camerati cars were white and black or white and blue. So that's what made me also think motorsport at that time was a small, small world compared to the global trillion-dollar market that it is today. So I wondered, was there some influence there? Was some cross-pollination? Was he trying to be like Cunningham or one of those?
No. No, I don't think so. I think Briggs Cunningham adopted the white and the blue, didn't he? That was originally when Briggs Cunningham went racing, the chassis was going to be blue and the body was going to be white. And then when Shelby went racing, he flipped it around and the body covered the chassis by the time Shelby was racing. So he put the stripe over the top. And that's why every Chevelle you ever see has got the double stripe over the top of the roof. I think that we've Shelby and hence Cunningham to thank for that. I shared with you guys a photograph of the British Empire trophy race one year. And, you know, our car's like leaping off the line in the middle of the grid. And right next to it is the red Colonel Ronnie Hoare official works entry. And behind it on the grid, there's a green GTO. And then there's another red one at the back. And alongside it on the grid, there are two of the Aston Martin project cars, 214 and 215. They're both dark green. The white car, in the modern parlance, the white car pops, Eric. I'm not really sure if that would have been on John Coombs's mind, but anybody who went out of the way to buy one as a number plate, that is very aggressive advertising for England at the time. There is no sponsorship on the side of these cars, and Coombs drove Walt Hansgen, and at the end of the race, Jack Sears apparently said to Walt Hansgen, what we usually do is we usually keep the car straight on the straight so the faster chaps can come by if they want to.
Side note, since we're talking about special colored Ferraris, Rob Walker, British, but he had like that SWB that he drove out that was pretty famous that he owned.
It was blue with white.
Yeah, they had that really sharp blue.
And if you look at the Scottish rugby colours, it's exactly the same colour as Scottish rugby's. I feel like the kind of man who prepared cars for people like Walt Hansgen to race in England, buy one. That's what it was all about. It was that white. You wanted it to be in Coombs white.
And you made a really interesting remark during one of our exchanges. It opened up something I had been thinking about, which was the car actually painted white from the factory? Because you made the joke, it might have just been repainted Jaguar white when it got to England. And I was like, you know what? That's probably not far from the truth. Who knows? Because record keeping was what it was back then. I mean, there are databases of this type of information, and the paperwork that we have says the car left the Ferrari factory in white. But in every joke, there's a hint of truth. And so that picture that you showed of all those GTOs together, for me, was sort of mind-blowing. There's only 36 of these cars to begin with. And in that picture alone, you have 4 of them. They were all built relatively close to one another because they would have had to have been, especially considering the white one is number 12 to have been produced, period. So I thought that picture was just a snapshot in time that was impressive. But you did make me think when you said, what if that was just Jaguar white? Because he had it laying around because all his other cars were painted the same color.
My thought was not so much that he had it laying around, but I read this morning about them putting extra louvers in the bonnet after the first outing. Well, that bonnet probably would have needed repainting right after you cut the extra. So are you going to order to Italy to get whatever color? No, you're not. You're going to hit it with the Jaguar white that you've got in your own body shop. So
is there a chance that car came naked from the factory?
No, they would have painted it something, because especially back then, by the time that thing showed up to England, it would have been rust. Who knows? Unless you go back in time and sit in the office when that order sheet came through and Enzo signed off on it and said, yeah, hey, do it. It's good Ferrari lore because there's no definitive, no, this is why it was done, everything like that.
It is interesting. The car's almost, in a sense, because of its involvement with the lightweights, the car's almost as much a part of Jaguar history, more a part of Jaguar history than Ferrari history.
You guys have mentioned it a couple of times, even on the previous episode, and I have a clarifying question that I'm sure our listeners might be confused about as well, unless they're in the classic Ferrari collector know. You talk about the vents, and when I look at reference pictures in period of this car and look at it now, and I look at other 250s, because there's not a lot of 250s to look at, there's 3 vents in the hood, which have these little plates you can put in, which actually can close the nose. So it looks like it has no vents whatsoever. Then there's 3 vents below the grille. Then there's either 2 vents or 3 vents on the side, basically in the fender. And then on this particular car, they hot rodded the hood, and it looks like, the side of a return vent in a house, like an HVAC system. There's like all these louvers like you would see on a Jaguar, right? When you guys are talking about the vents, oh, it left as a 3-vent car. Oh, they modified it and added the vents. I'm trying to understand, and I'm sure the listeners are trying to understand, what exactly are you talking about?
On the GTOs, obviously they modified the hood itself, but those 3 vents on the fish bowls, whatever you want to call them, those are on all of them. But those were, so depending on where you're racing, open, close them. And this is on the 275s as well. It's the side vents they're talking about. Earlier production ones, they'll only have the couple on there. Then later production ones, they'll have 3. I mean, some will go up to 6, depending on the car. So it's about if it's an alloy, if it's a comp, what have you. So that's one key indicator, kind of like you can tell when the car was built production wise, where it sits in the range, or if you can tell, like, especially with the 275s, it's like a 2-cam, 4-cam, that kind of stuff. But all it does is boil down to it's just venting, get air out from the motor because those things are hot.
So this thing's an oddity then, right? Because it's number 12 and it's got 3 vents, whereas all the other early cars had 2.
Yeah.
Was this the first one with 3?
I believe it was the first one that put the 3 on there. I think I'd have to go back and look, but I think it's one of the first ones that they did it on.
Why wouldn't all the subsequent 250s just have 3 vents after that point?
All the previous ones, the first 11 that were built prior, started racing and they realized that it's running hot. Okay, let's put another vent in. So subsequent ones, they got another vent. So it's a race car. And it wasn't like they were cranking out 20 a day. They were doing 1 a month, if that. If it's going through, you could reach back out and send the telegram. Hey, put more vents in the side because it needs to cool better. Okay, our next ones we build, we'll put more vents in.
So was that an option then that would have been presented to Coombs to either be a 2-vent or a 3-vent at that point? Or did he cut the vent in the car himself? That's the other part I was confused about.
My understanding, he did it himself. Standing is it left with 2, but then I don't know if Coombs did it or it went back and the factory did it. It's not someone just knocked it out, in their garage. I don't know 100% on that.
Do we know how soon after the car was delivered that it got the 3rd vent?
We'd have to look and see. John got all the books with the car. And I know Chris has a ton of the documentation on or copies of it, but that's a good question.
This also leans back into what we were talking about with the paint. If you cut it, now you've got all this exposed metal. You're going to have to finish it to keep it from rusting. Those fenders would have needed to be repainted. And you're doing this hood, which is the amount of louvers in this hood is insane compared to any of the other ones I've seen looking at the pictures. It's like the whole front end was resprayed.
We know it left the factory in white. It's documented in the build sheet. But what could have been the only white one is when they shipped it, they could have just sent all that white paint with it because knowing full and well that they're going to have to do repainting on the car anyways. So they could have just sent that paint with the car and then go, here you go. Because it wasn't like they have paint matching technology like they do today. So they could have just sent that along because knowing good and well that they're going to have to repaint this car at some point. It'd be interesting to know if they did that with all the other ones too, saying, hey, we painted the car. Here's a couple extra gallons of paint because we know you're going to have to repaint it. Coombs never this is why or anything like that. And so it's one of those things that goes down. Because I mean, it was before Sears bought it, someone repainted it red because back then they got Ferrari supposed to be red. So it got repainted. They did it in red instead of doing it in the white. So it wasn't repainted white until Shirley had it.
Unless it was red underneath the white.
It's
sort of like the Model T, right? You can have it in
any color you want, black. You could go back to some cars and you look in the door jams. You look somewhere, you're going to find original color somewhere if you dig deep enough.
Not on a restoration like this. It would have been stripped all the way down, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's really no way to kind of do any investigative work on the car itself and try and find something that's showing what it was originally.
So Coombs gets this car with a 5-gallon bucket of paint, a thing of ravioli, and a spare interior. None of this stuff adds up at the end of the day. The interior is the puzzling part.
Yeah.
What we know is it left with the blue interior, which means Ferrari built it the same way they build all the other ones, which is why I sort of feel like the white is kind of suspect in the sense that maybe it left the factory red, like every other 250 was at that time. And then to John's point, they did all these modifications and then they said, well, we're going to respray the car to match all the rest of our cars.
Nah, because Mealy had the build sheet on the car from Ferrari. He went down the list. That's how you could see it left the factory blue. So we know it left in white.
When we think about this, when we're talking about it leaving the factory, we're like imagining the Corvette factory with like
right.
It wasn't like that, was it? Was it Scaglietti that built the GTO, William?
Yeah, the bodies, yeah.
So let's be clear that the rolling chassis is being built in Maranello and Scaglietti is where? nearby. Is he nearby? I don't know.
Yeah, he wasn't that far. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
But then the car is having these handmade body panels put on it. So I guess, Eric, what I'm envisaging is I feel like if Luigi and Mario were short on blue leather that day, that's why that car got a black interior.
No, the black got put in it after it was delivered.
Yeah.
So it came with a spare interior. Like, would you just go pick up a 250 interior? Like, that's that?
All it was is the seats. I mean, everything else is just bare. It's not like there's carpeting and everything in that car. So it was just the seat itself, but it's not like it would have, they got torn. It wasn't like it was, oh, it raced about 50 times and the seats were shot. So he got to reupholster them. It was 2 weeks after they got the car. They all of a sudden they changed the interior. No one ever fessed up why. Showed up, he got Hill to race, scheduled to race the car. It had blue interior. Then when Hill came to go race the car, it had black interior. Was it Hill requesting, hey, he wanted black interior instead? I mean, who knows? Maybe he was sliding around because it went from that, I want to say Alcantara almost type material, whatever that was, and it went into the sidewall. It was leather. So maybe better grip on the seat so you weren't sliding around as much. Because, I mean, you're not talking 5-point, 6-point harness and all that stuff back then. You got some shoulder straps and stuff like that. But maybe that helped stick his ass in the seat so he wasn't sliding around much. I mean, they're pretty deep in those seats.
To John's point, right? It's sort of like we cut the hood to add the air passages or whatever. So we had to respray it. So we resprayed the car or whatever so everything matched. The interior, if it was a livery thing where it's got to be white and black, nobody's really going to see those seats. They were bucket seats. They were low. You could have made the argument. But Italy's not a hop, skip, and a jump from the UK in the 1960s. I mean, there were airplanes and stuff and trains, whatever. But to get a new interior, even though it's 2 seats, let's say 2 seats from the factory in less than 2 weeks, they either came with the car.
No, they would have been upholstered in-house.
Oh, yeah, they would have done it. Yeah, they would have done it.
Where did the original blue seats go? Because nobody knows where they are. This gets to the so what. Is the white that important? I mean, we're making a big deal about the fact that it is the only one in white.
I mean, to me, it is. I don't like red Ferraris. I'm not a fan. I mean, they look great in red. You know, I want something else besides red. I think it looks really good in white. I mean, that car looks really good in white.
I don't think it's important at all.
Ooh, okay.
I mean, as I'm stopping and thinking about GTOs, what color do I think works best on a GTO? I mean, my favorite GTO is the Innis Island one in that pale green. It's the only one in that pale green. That's a fun color. That's like diluted Mopar limelight. But that's the British Racing Partnership color that was Innis Island's team at the time. So, you know, I like that car. I just don't think it's important at all. I just think Coombs painted it his team color and that was it. Eric, you talked about that photo and how we talked about how the car kind of stands out from the other cars. I think it does. But the Motorsport Lunch With article talks about typically his cars were immaculately turned out in white or grey with black. That immaculately turned out, it made me think a little bit about, you know, the way that Ron Dennis is at McLaren, this sort of business of you were successful at racing because you do all the other things very precisely. And I don't know much about what Coombs did in the war, but you get the sense the way that he approached motor racing was with a sort of military kind of precision. And so, you know, it's like saying, you know, all of the foreign tanks are red. How come your tank's green? Well, tanks are green, dude. We paint tanks green. You know, you red ones over there, but tanks are green. You know, I feel like it wasn't. And Eric, I think what Paul Baxter is talking about when he's talking about the nationalism, particularly, he talks a lot about Italy. Yeah, the Italian cars were red. And certainly, I think for the Italian marques in the post-war period, there's very much a sense of building back, building the country that was destroyed in the war. And therefore, there is a big sense of national pride that you are going to be in Italian red. Remember, the Ferrari badge has the Italian flag on it. Ferrari was racing, you know, was Italy against the world. Coombs wasn't like that. Coombs was me selling Jaguars more than you, Mike Hawthorn. So I'm going to paint the car in my color, do a bit of club racing with it. And that point about, you know, so many of them being here, I wonder if there wasn't so many on the grid, like 4 of the first 2 dozen GTOs, 4 of them on the grid for that one race. I just feel like there was small community of people who were wealthy enough to go motor racing. There was a window, 62, 63, 64, when if you wanted to go sports car racing, that was the best car to buy. So although there were only 39 of them made, those 39, that was enough, right? If Ferrari could have sold 390, he would have done. Those 39, that was the size of the sport at the time. So I just feel like the guys racing them had grown up in the pre-war era when every car was completely individual. So the fact that this is the only white GTO, I
mean, I think it makes it special, but it's how much adds value-wise. It's up to debate. And again, it goes back to who's going to buy the car.
You said 40 to 80 million. It's interesting that, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about, in my mind, there's sort of good GTOs and bad GTOs.
Yeah.
And my perception of a bad GTO was that Pierre Bardignon, I think that was the family name, but it was a car that had been bought new in France, and I guess the owner had wrecked it, been killed, and then the family had hung on to it for ages and ages and ages.
Yeah.
It had no actual race history, and it just sat for ages, and then Bonham sold it some years ago, and that car made 35. So that seemed to me the sort of bottom of the market. And then old Dave paid a rumored 75 million, didn't he, for the only silver GTO, if I'm right?
McNeil from WeatherTech.
Dave McNeil. 75 was the number that I'd heard on that.
Yeah, imagine 2018, but that's the creme de la creme. That's the best of the best of the best.
Although it was a long time ago, I feel like the market, if anything, is gone up since 2018, but it's come down since 2018 as well. I feel like, as the resident expert, where does this car fall? Is it a good one or is it a bad one? Where does it fall?
I was hoping we were going to go here. We avoided this on the other episode. William was like, I'm not talking about.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into it. I mean, I hate throwing out there because you don't know. I mean, that's what auction's for. I put it at between 45 to 55. In my opinion, it's a well-known car. It's had long-term ownership history. It was Jack Sears, then John Shirley. Yeah, prior to Sears owning it, there's a couple here and there, but he's owned it for 30 years. Sears was the same boat. He owned it close to 30 years. You have a car that's had long-term ownership history in the life of the car. It's very well known. One of only one of the factory white cars, one of only 8 of the right-hand drive cars, brand new block. It comes with a spare motor as well. You add all these things, and then, having some of those little special touches to it, and that's where we got into too about the interior color of that car. Almost all of them came with that bluish color interior, that like light blue, whatever. But this one's got black interior, which, as Eric mentioned, was done like 2 weeks after he got the car. It was delivered at that, but then for some reason, still don't know why, before Graham Hill raced it, or he drove it once, and then all of a sudden it showed up. It had all new interior. It was black. So it's always had black interior from then on. It's got a lot of these special features to it that separate itself from all the other cars that were built. I mean, you're going to have a very unique car when you go to the owners meetings that they have every few years that they do in private. Any GTO is going to get in, but you tell them, I got, the only white one. They're going to pay for that thing to come. You might have to spend a nickel of your own money. I put it in there. It's just because of where the market's at. Still a very, very valuable car, but it didn't win Le Mans, anything like that. Yes, it's got some great race history and who's driven it. Yeah, it's got a couple wins, but like at Goodwood, the Teats, that kind of stuff. It's not something where it's going to all of a sudden, because of race history, jack it up to the 80 million mark. That's not going to happen. And I don't know if you ever see that kind of number again, unless McNeil sells his car. Then that one, yeah, because that's like the perfect one.
What's so great about Dave McNeil's car? The only silver one?
It's got a ton of race history. That one, original numbers matching, the whole 9 yards. Not so much necessarily restored, but like just, they say, sympathetic restoration type of deal. It's the best one out there in regards to originality. It's got everything you want for the boxes to tick. If someone's got that kind of money and they want that specific one, they're going to pay up for it. Hard to say if someone else would. Something's only worth what someone's going to pay for it. But if you want it and you got the deep pockets for it, just here's a blank check. Just fill in the amount. I want the car.
Yeah.
That was 2018. I mean, you do inflation now, stuff like that, you're over $100 million valuation now. So if you go comparing it, certain things kind of all of a sudden created that perfect storm to all of a sudden create a very special car. You could say it's the most, your Mercedes, whatchamacallit, that's a one-off at $140 million. And you looked how that whole deal was structured. that person really doesn't even own the car technically. I mean, they paid all that money, but Mercedes still basically kind of controls it. I don't know. I don't see it. Everyone's touching on like, oh, the McLaren F1's the next GTO, is that. Well, McLaren F1 pricing has been stuck at between 18 million to low 20s, mid 20s million range forever.
How many McLaren F1s are there?
I think it's 64 road going cars, and then they built like 100, something like that, but then the balance are all the race cars.
Okay.
So I think they built more race cars than street cars, if memory serves me.
You say that the values on McLaren F1s are stagnant. I believe you that they have been, but I feel like, we're in a time where certainly people under the age of 40 are having to tighten their belts a little bit. I feel like if the economy booms again, then you'll see McLaren F1 flip the old GTO. Because I feel like, the values of cars like Packards and Duesenbergs are sustained by the people in their 70s and 80s passing them around. And it's like musical chairs
amongst themselves.
More cars than there are old coots left to buy them. And sooner or later, there are too few old coots still in circulation trying to buy them. And eventually the price goes down. Well, I feel like GTOs are a while away from that, but they're going to get there, aren't they? They're going to get there.
Yeah. It's not like they're going to come down to like $5 million, but circle of life, so to speak, it reaches that value point where, okay, that's pretty much where it's going to be at. It might go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but you've weeded out the old coots and you got some people that still appreciate it and that kind of stuff. But that pool of buyers and people that want to own the car and have it is shrunk down. In about 20 years, it's going to be really interesting to see where things go and how things transition, because it's like all of a sudden you're getting into Fox body Mustangs and stuff from the 80s, and the IROCs and stuff like that are starting to do very, very well out in the marketplace.
Just on a personal level, I waited a long, long time for Fox body Mustangs to come, and then when they came, I rushed out of the market too quickly and left money on the table. It's not quite as bad as rushing out of Nvidia too early, which I did as well, but I thought a 5X game was enough. Yeah, I left quite a lot of money on the table there.
But it's going to be a lot of fun, because the other great thing about this, for what they're doing at Mecum, they have close to almost 80 Ferraris that are going to be crossing the block during Kissimmee. We tagged the line moniker to it on Super Saturday. Not only have that GTO, but that Bachmann collection, man, it's got some very big, heavy hitting cars in it as well. So they have a lot to build up to it. So you're going to have a lot of eyes on there, not just showing up just to see what the GTO does. There's a lot of other Ferraris that are going to be crossing that block that people want to get their hands on. So there's going to be a lot of energy in that room.
Why Mecum? I would have thought it was one of what my wife calls the pass the butter auction companies.
Yeah.
English auctioneer, right? What's happened behind the scenes for Mecum to have not just this Bachmann collection and this white car?
Mecum's really stepped up their game in regards to, I don't want to say quality, because they're bread and butter muscle cars. That they've always gotten the best of the best in those, but they've slowly started emerging in that market in regards to the higher end, the Ferraris, Lamborghinis, everything like that. But the interesting story behind this, Chris Mealy, who's the GM Dancing Horse of Nashville, which is the Ferrari dealer in Nashville, put all these together, not only for the GTO, but for the Bachmann collection. Long story short, right place, right time, driving someone that knew John Shirley well, this and that. And the question got asked, hey, do you know anyone that might be interested in John's car? And Chris was like, yeah, I probably do. And he thought of Dana, because Dana Mecum's got an unbelievable personal collection himself, and he's a Ferrari collector. Wasn't that interested where he'd want to open up his own checkbook. Then they had several conversations. Hey, let's do this because we're working on some other things in regards to exposure, with these other Ferraris and that. And it came across the board. I mean, Mecum does an awesome job. You're not talking some backwoods, something like that, where they're running through a barn or something like that, where they got some tractors and stuff going. Mecum's really kicked up the game. They're getting a little more picky to what they're taking and trying to curate and cultivate a great selection of cars. And Kissimmee has pretty much got to the point where that is kicking off the year, but kicking off auction season. I mean, that's the first one. That's the biggest one. It's a special event, and I think it's well deserving it.
So Mecum are trying to steal some of Amelia Island, like Gooding at Amelia Island. That was traditionally the auction, the one that people hung their hats on for what the year was going to look like. Are you saying now that increasingly Mecum Mecum want their event in Kissimmee to be the event that sets the tone for the classic car year?
There's a couple things happening here, John, to add clarity to the story that I even heard on the previous episode, which is William's point, right place at the right time. Chris is friends with Dana, went to Dana on a personal level, said, you might be interested in this car. He turns it down. He says, but I run an auction company, right? So it's sort of logical conclusion. I think if Mecum hadn't been able to handle this type of car, which they can, it probably would have gone to a Bonhams or to a Gooding or to a Sotheby's or to whoever. Chris would have shopped it around, right? Because they want to get it out there. But on the other side of this isn't the first time that Mecum's gone down this path. We know about the 917, we know about Seinfeld's Porsches, stuff like that. And so they've been trying for a while now to bring in, some more of these higher level cars. And I think this just happened to be a moment where it's like, well, shoot, let's go for gold and see what happens. And so I think the other thing that William's mentioning here that I don't want to conflate is that they're not kicking off auction season. What they're doing is they're kicking off the auction season for Ferraris for 2026, because all the numbers of the 71 cars, if we include the Bianco Speciale with the Bachmann collection, are going to dictate the prices of Ferraris for the rest of the year. So because Kissimmee is in January, before Amelia, before Gooding, before Car Week, it's a huge responsibility for them, and it's going to dictate the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be a bellwether because the Bachmann collection has such a broad spectrum in regards to new and old. The GTO is its own thing. So set in tone, set in dollar value, that's right. But for what the rest of the cars are going to, I kind of look this way. Yeah, like Eric mentioned, I mean, you're going to go wherever service-wise, give you the white glove, just as any other Gooding would, everything like that. I like Mecum more because it's not so, just say, nose up in the air. People are there like, oh, look at me. Mecum's more, hey, it's more, I don't want to say wholesome, but, it's more friendly, I guess you could say. People will talk to people and stuff like that. I think it's a great arena for it. It's going to do well, and especially the audience that's going to be able to be there, not only in person, but worldwide. They have their own Roku channel now as well. They did a special on this that might have already dropped the first time. They're going to show repeatedly, but it's going to be interesting to see. I think Mecum's really stepping up, and where they go in subsequent auctions throughout the year, I think it kind of dictate that's the route they're going to want to go. And I think they will. So I think they'll do a great job.
Yeah, I'm going to investigate this Bachmann collection and have a little look at it, because that's an interesting thought that you had about as Mecum become more serious players in European collectibles rather than just domestic stuff that traditionally they were involved in. I can see a time where they would be setting the trend for pricing, and therefore it'd be interesting to see what happens with Ferraris going forward. Gents, thank you very much for your time. Been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been fun.
I very much appreciate you going the extra mile for us to help us with this project, because it has been really an interesting project to work on, and obviously there's more to come. But getting to the bottom of what I consider kind of a motorsport mystery has been fascinating, and you're a wealth of information, so I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I've appreciated being involved. I love the story, love Ferraris. Thank you, Drive Through.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.